Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor trained in trauma and addiction. The Asking Why podcast is for anyone on a journey of healing and restoration. If you are searching for answers to life's questions and want to learn more about root causes from a psychological and theological mix, this show is for you. In this podcast, myself and a co-host from Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness will interview guests on a wide range of topics in order to get down to the heart of the problems facing our world and understand why things happen and how to change the world and ourselves for the better. Want to learn more tips and tricks to living a healthy lifestyle? Visit us at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to meet our staff or book a speaker, go to clintdaviscounseling.com. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe today. All right, welcome to Asking Why podcast, episode 42. Got to do two podcasts this week because we were a little behind. So we have Lisa Rowell today, and we're going to be talking about infant loss, miscarriage. So it's a pretty heavy topic that I find that people don't discuss enough. So we're going to try to be sensitive with that. So if you have had a miscarriage or lost a child, we want to be very gentle in the way we talk about this, while at the same time talking about some facts and maybe alleviating some myths and giving some encouragement. And so, Lisa had reached out to me and we had talked, and she had been listening to the podcast and was talking to me about her ministry. And I just love the idea. And obviously as a clinician, I've worked with a lot of women and men and families that have had miscarriages or lost a child. And so I see the intimate ways in which that, plays out, and I'm sure you do too. So, let's get started. So Lisa, tell me kind of who you are and about your ministry.
Yeah, so I'm Lisa, and I've been here in Bossier for about 14 years, I think. I'm from San Antonio, but about a few, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I actually began the ministry, and we minister to families who have had miscarriage, stillbirth, infant loss, or in those early years. Occasionally I do ministry for older children. But basically we send out a basket, and I call it a basket now because I used to deliver to houses. But now we just mail everything out mainly. And it has like a bear, scriptures, music, necklaces, books, answering those questions women and men and children have whenever they have a loss. Mm-hmm. And so we minister to those families because whenever somebody has had a loss, most times family members and friends don't know how to reach them, or they say the wrong thing. So we're here to help minister in a way that people don't know how to.
Yeah. And so what's the name of the ministry?
Julianna Grace Ministry.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
And so how did you get into that? What was the story? Like, what's your testimony?
So my story is we had planned for our first baby. We got married. We had planned. Everything was great. I was in tip-top shape. We got pregnant. When we decided to get pregnant, it was pretty quick. We were pregnant about 5 months when I noticed Julianna quit moving. So that's about 23 weeks in pregnancy. And so when women are like, oh, what's going on? But everyone around me was like, no, she's fine. My baby quit moving at this time. And then they just drink some orange juice. Everything's fine. And so about a few days, she wasn't moving. And so I went into the doctor's office by myself. My husband didn't come with me because
everybody told you it was okay.
It was fine, okay. Yeah. We're fine. And I'm not one to be in people's faces and like panic and stuff. So I went. The nurses came in and I saw Julianna on the sonogram machine and she wasn't moving. And I thought maybe this was a different type of sonogram machine. And so later on, the doctor came in and he said, Lisa, I'm sorry, but she's gone. And so immediately I felt this condemnation. What did I do? And that's very common. Women think we must have done something to kill our children. And so that's what did I do to kill my child? And so a few days later, I, in the process, rededicated my life to Christ in my tears and pain. And then I went to the hospital. And 24 hours later, I gave birth to Julianna Grace. She was 11 and a half inches long, 1.5 pounds. She was, it looked like a small doll. And I had a woman was going to come and take pictures of her. And I didn't do that. It's something I don't live with regret, but that's something I do regret. But she left this basket. And so a few days later, I get home, and in the basket was scriptures, music, mascara, chapstick, tissues, and tons of books about heaven. And I had a few other friends give me books about just loss, just losing a child and the process. And one of the books goes to the book of Job. And so as I'm searching for Christ, who are you? I have a other testimony about my background where I'm thinking, okay, the Lord must hate me because all these terrible things keep happening. But there I found the Lord, and all of a sudden, like the Lord was like, "This is what I want you to do." He had comforted me in a way I can't put into words, and that's what He wanted me to comfort other women. And so that's how it started. And so about 7 years ago, I started little by little, just, ministering to families and really helping women come out of the closet about their loss, because there's this shame and guilt. And, well, I was a bad teenager, so this is why this happened, or I did this and this is why it happened. And those are all lies of the enemy. And so I'm able to just minister to families how to be there for their loved ones when they're going through these things, or things to say and not to say. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that.
Oh, yeah.
I know that had to be extremely traumatic for everybody involved.
Yes. I want to say the first about 3 years, and I had a baby, like literally almost a year to the date after I had my loss. And so it was pretty traumatic for about 3 years, but I just knew the Lord, He just promised me that He was going to do something with this, and He was going to make beauty for my ashes, and He was going to give me joy again. And so I kind of put Him to the test. I said, "All right, Lord, this is what your word says. I'm going to do it. Don't hurt me."
Yeah.
And He did. And He's blessed me, but it's been really cool just to see just women be blessed, and grandmothers be blessed, and husbands come out and, be blessed. And it's such a beautiful thing what the Lord's been doing.
That's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that, two truths can happen at the same time. One is that you're seeing God be good in these things, but can you talk to me a little bit about what symptoms you were having from kind of a mental health perspective while, it's like God's good and He's sovereign and all those things are happening.
Yeah.
But like, can you talk about what women experience?
Yes.
And maybe even your husband. And what's his name?
His name is Steven.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
And he's like total opposite from me. Like he would never do this. So when I first lost her, there's this condemnation.
So a lot of shame.
A lot of shame. And then obviously you have pregnancy hormones that you're trying to deal with. And you go into the hospital.
Well, you say obviously, but be explicit.
Okay. When women are pregnant, they're emotional, and women, when we find, if we, most women who plan for their baby, or they want their baby. And so we're very excited from the beginning.
Yeah.
Is it a boy or a girl? Who is she or he going to look like? What are their colors in the rooms going to be? Then you start playing first Christmas, first Easter, first birthday. Are they going to play baseball? You start planning for the future early on. That's just how we are. Men, I can't really speak for men, but what I do know is I think men get more excited once they're there. They're like, oh, okay, like, this is real.
Yeah.
And so for me, once I found out I had that loss, I had this condemnation. I went to the hospital, not thinking straight. And so my husband's having to, he's grieving the loss of his child, and now he's grieving me because I'm hurting. I'm having to go through labor. And we went through natural labor because we hadn't been through the pregnancy, like delivery classes or anything. So I had no clue, what was going to happen. So we didn't do the epidural. Everything was natural. And then we have her. Well, I didn't get to carry her as long, and that's something that I encourage mothers to do. Carry your babies. I know it sounds so morbid, but do it, because that is the only time you have with your child if you're having a stillborn child, or even, there's so many different types of losses, but my biggest thing is hold your child, take pictures. And I didn't get to do that. And so we go home, and then for me, I was further along enough that my milk came. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what to do. I was like, what's going on? So if somebody would have said, hey, take a Zyrtec D, you would have dried up. Or, hey, there's milk banks that will take your milk.
Yeah.
And so there's different ways of healing. Everyone does things different. I've heard women who've donated, a year's supply, 2-year supply after their loss. Mm-hmm. And that's just how, they dealt with it. So you have milk.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you said, carry your baby as long as possible, mm-hmm. hold your baby, take pictures, all those kind of things. Mm-hmm. If that's what's best for you, right? I mean, everybody's going to grieve differently, and everybody has a different background.
They do. And here's the thing. In other countries, they sometimes allow you to take your baby home. Mm-hmm. And it's so hard within those first few hours to make all those decisions.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is I try to get the family to have an advocate, to take pictures, to do fingerprints, and hold those pictures.
Ah, that's good.
Until the parent's ready. Too many times parents say, I wish I would have done A, B, and C. And so I know that's such a hard concept because I didn't, there's this one grandma said, I don't even want to see my baby. I don't want to see that baby.
Yeah.
But then I got to coach her through it. And now she's just delighted that, she got that time. Mm-hmm. So everyone is different. But don't throw that idea away just yet, because it's a lot of families living in regret. I haven't met one mother who has said that, oh, I wish I never did that.
Yeah. Do you have a kind of workup or a sheet or kind of like a...
I don't.
Okay. Well, we're going to work on that, me and you.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I would love to put something on our website, attach what you do to it, and then give people kind of the options so that they can pick. Because I think what you're saying is so perfect in the sense that we don't know what we need until we're there, and then we're in trauma and we can't respond appropriately. And so afterwards we have a lot of regret and a lot of like, oh, I didn't even know I could have done that. Or there was no way emotionally I could do that in the moment. Yeah. So I didn't do it, but I wish I would have had this for later. And so, yeah, I think if we could come up with a way where people would know what their options are, and then have people who can do those options for them until they're ready. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a list of them. That would be a really awesome thing to offer people and mothers and families, for dads and kids and for whoever.
Because for me, I was not in the right mindset. My husband wanted to make sure that I was comfortable, and unfortunately, he didn't know what was right either. And so our situation was sad, but our situation was much better still than some people.
No, definitely.
Still, so I feel I really can't complain, because look what the Lord's done.
Yeah.
3 years ago, or 3 years after my loss, I was still kind of in a fog. Like, I have this baby alive, but there's someone still missing. Mm-hmm. And so,
yeah, tell me about the whole rainbow baby thing. Like, so how do you sit with that?
Yeah, so I know a lot.
I don't want to offend anybody who loves that term.
Some people, a lot of women do. Some people don't. It's such a, everyone's different, and whatever, is everyone. If you're happy with that, good. If you're not, then that's fine too. So basically, there's a storm, which Julianna, that was a big storm. And then when I got pregnant again, another thing I was going to talk about is some women, when they get pregnant again, they're super excited. Me, I was not. Mm-hmm. Me, I was just like, people are like, oh, you're rainbow baby. And I was like... Terrified. The whole pregnancy. I think after like the 5th month, I got this piece. And then I went into like early labor and she was born like 5 weeks early. And the Lord just gave me this piece, but I was terrified. And then the first year after Gabriella was here, I was still expecting for her to go. Mm-hmm. And so like, it was still this like 2 years of not sure, but...
right. So at that point you're in like 5 years deep. Right. I mean, it's important to say because,
Yeah.
these things last your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not something that grief isn't, if you lose a child or a baby, it's not something that you just get over. And I think people
No.
think that, right? Move on.
They do.
And it's
They
like, no,
do.
you're not
Yeah.
moving on. You're all that's moving with you.
Yeah,
Now,
it's
how you
like-
integrate that and
yeah.
make sense of it is important, but it's not
Yeah.
something you're moving past.
No.
And a lot of times people will say, how many kids do you have?
Yeah.
Can you talk
And
about that a little bit?
So I do say.
Sorry, we
two-
jumped off the rainbow baby thing.
Okay, I do say 2 kids because it's just Julianna's part of our life.
Absolutely.
Gabriella actually tells her little schoolmates. We homeschool, but we do this homeschool co-op, and she tells people, "Oh, today's my sister's birthday," and they're like, "Whoa, there's only one of y'all."
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, she's with Jesus," just so
That's awesome, though.
nonchalant. But she still, she grieves too, though, because it's somebody who she never got to meet, and she sees that it affects us. But back to the rainbow baby. So for me, my story's different. After I gave birth to Gabriella, I was in total fear, and then you have all the hormones of pregnancy. I'm like having postpartum and crying and not crying and like freaking out, and then she did the NICU, so that beeping noise that reminded you she was alive was no longer there. So I was freaking out.
Oh, I bet.
And but the day I brought her home, I had a rainbow in my eye. And it's so weird. I went to the doctor, couldn't explain it, but every time I look at a light, there was this rainbow, this half rainbow. And so I didn't understand it at the time, had it for a whole year. After Gabriella's first birthday, the day of, it went away. And that's when I started to adopt.
That's crazy.
It is like, I went to the doctor and I was like, something's wrong with me. And
Yeah.
my husband's like, there's nothing there. And it was only in one eye. And so for me, that was God's promise.
Yeah.
That he had, he was going to take care of me. So for me, I love rainbows. I am a big, people send me pictures of rainbows. I had an article written by our Calvary Chapel magazine, and the woman who was writing the article, her friend sent her a picture of a rainbow, had no clue about my story. Didn't even know, she didn't know anything about it. And so she sent it, her friend sent it to her, the writer sent it to me, and she said, oh my goodness, this is a sign, a huge sign. So for me, I love it. But not everyone is on board with it.
No, absolutely. I think the reason is because sometimes people use it inappropriately, as if it replaces, or some people don't have another kid or aren't capable of it, and so they're like, "Is God's promise not good? Did I not get my rainbow?"
Yeah.
And I think that's what's difficult for people to hear.
Yeah. So and that's why I'm very sensitive to all kinds of losses, because we don't know if somebody tried for 5 years and got pregnant and lost a baby, or did in vitro and lost a baby. We don't know people's stories. And so I'm very sensitive with my words. And when people have those questions, I might not have all the answers, but I do know that if I lean on to the Lord, He's my comforter. And they may not ever have children, and I have friends who may not ever have children, and it's sad. But even still, you can have another child, but you still will never get over that loss.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I see in people is for them to understand that that wasn't God's plan, and what I mean is that Garden of Eden, right, was God's plan. No death, no destruction, no sin, no brokenness. And so everything after chapter 3 is not part of the plan. Now God's sovereign over it, and He's making good out of it and beauty out of ashes. But, He's doing with what sin is trying to do that's destructive, He's going to make good out of. And so when we lose a family member or a baby or anyone, their death is not part of God's plan, as far as He's causing it, or, He's allowing it, because that's part of Him being sovereign over the world. But with our babies, it's not, He planned this so I can learn some lesson, or, so He can be, glorified or whatever. It's a part of brokenness in the world.
Yeah, God's not cruel. He's not a cruel God. He's merciful and just, and He's not throwing things out there. I mean, he's not my God. That's not my God. But I do talk about that. One of my videos is there's this shame and condemnation of what did I do, and if which is a lie, because if we had to pay for our own sin, what was the point of Jesus dying on the cross?
Absolutely.
And so
He's not God's not Zeus.
No.
Right? He's not got a lightning bolt him because you
No.
screwed up in your teenage years or because you had sex before marriage or because you
No.
did something like now you lost your baby.
No.
It does feel like that though.
It does. And
Yeah.
and okay, so
With everything. I would say not just miscarriage,
no.
just life, right? Anytime something goes bad, you're like,
that one sin.
Yeah, Job's friends coming in going,
Yeah.
what'd you
What'd
do?
you do?
You know? Like,
Yeah. So to me that, I mean, and you're right, like we were never meant, I mean, we can't handle death. We don't understand what's in heaven still. And
Yeah.
so like we can't comprehend.
No.
I think about David when he lost his son. He knew where his son was at. He was with God. And there was no way he could, I mean, what was the point of, for him, it was like, what's the point of grieving anymore? Like, I'm the one that got the worst deal out of it, Yeah. And so David just really ministered to me. And so I just look at him as my example, I guess.
Yeah.
And so.
It's good.
Yeah.
So what are some, I guess, myths about miscarriages that you hear a lot, or, I mean, we covered some of them, but.
Well, for like, I think people think we do things, but it's sin. When sin happened, when sin entered the world, you started to have cancers and tumors and miscarriages and, late child or just death in general. And so, no amount of working out, well, it's because you worked out too much, Lisa, because I used to lift kettlebells. It's because you worked or you're too stressed. These things, you're that kind of thing doesn't affect, cause you to have a miscarriage. People do crack cocaine and have kids. And so that's something that angered me a lot too, as here I was,
being as healthy as possible.
Planned my life out, got married, blah, blah, blah. And then this happens. And I'm like, okay. And so, nothing.
Well, it's an attack to the ego a little bit, right? It's like, I did all the right things. I don't deserve to have this.
Yeah. So like for me, I was raised in foster care, had an abusive father, mother walked out. And so, for me, it made total sense that you have this person who had all this stuff happen, PTSD, and let's add a baby in it. And so whenever I did that and she died, it was like, what, I tried everything and, what's the point? And so, thank God the Lord intervened, because I was very suicidal then too. But, God had other plans. And so I think a lot of people, after they have a loss, it's like, what's the point of life? But if we allow him, if we couple that with counseling, and we just seek the Lord, he could heal that grief and comfort you. I always have triggers. There's always triggers. People who have losses years later, there's all kinds of triggers. And so, but if we just say, all right, here I am. This is all you got. Like, if you can do something with it, go ahead.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had our first miscarriage in October, in 2019. So I don't remember the exact date, but, my wife was pretty far along, not too far, but, I remember we heard the heartbeat. We had 2 boys already. We, luckily for us, by the grace of God, both the first 2 kids were, kind of one and done. We tried for a month, bam. We're like, oh, this is easy. The second was like 2 months maybe. And I, as a counselor, sit with people who are trying for years to get pregnant and, having miscarriages, and kind of, I've walked with people through marriage and engagement, and then, they get married and then they get pregnant, and then, I'm like, I've known them for 3 years, and then they have the miscarriage, and then I follow them afterwards and help them through it. And I'm just like, man, it's so painful. On the one hand, for me, it's like, well, I've learned the do's and don'ts, or what it's like, or, the varied ways that people struggle and grieve. And so, I've been through a lot of trauma myself, and that's one thing I never experienced, obviously. And I was praying that when we got pregnant the third time, I was like, I just had this eerie feeling of like, this is not going to go well. And I told my wife, my therapist, and like, I can't get rid of this kind of gut reaction of, I'm going to experience this trauma and it's going to give me empathy. And I remember being on my knees and praying to God, like, I don't want this type of empathy. Like, this is one of those ones. Can I just have a pass? Like, I have, this other trauma stuff, all these other things to have empathy with. I don't want to have empathy in this area. I'll have sympathy and I'll keep working with people. And so we were, 8-9 weeks in, and she had felt weird about it too. And we went, heartbeat was fine. And then I can't remember exactly what happened specifically, but we went back in for another checkup. I think just because she was a little nervous. And I'll never forget sitting in I got up that morning and I was just like, this is not good. I didn't say anything to her. We just got up, got our stuff, went to the doctor. And so we're sitting in the doctor's waiting room, and they're coming in to do the ultrasound. And she's like, checking it on her belly. And she's like, I can't really find anything, but maybe it's just, not far along yet. And so we'll do a vaginal, ultrasound. And I'm like, I'm sitting behind her. They sit you as a husband in the little chair behind her. And she sits up, and it's just dead quiet. And so the nurse leaves. And through the wall, you hear ba-boom, 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 ba-boom of whoever's getting an ultrasound. The lady, I think, was like, 35 weeks. So it's just like banging through the wall. And it was just this contrast of like, that's what we should be hearing. And that's what we've heard every other time. And this is not going the way that, and I remember just a pit in my stomach. And so the nurse comes back in with our pediatrician. And I'm just instantly like, oh gosh, this is terrible. And neither one of us have said anything. I just reach up and I'm rubbing her back and holding her hand. And they come in and check it. And, she's just like, I'm so sorry. And they're like, we'll give you a second. And so they leave. And, of course, she's devastated and I'm devastated. And I'm just trying to be supportive. And, I'm just kind of still in shock. And then they walk you out and, you go through. This is the worst part about it. And, this is something I think people deal with all the time. But then you have to go back through the waiting room with all these other people and their babies and all these pictures all over the walls. And they take you into this random doctor's room, and then they sit you down and kind of walk you through the process very sterilely, obviously. Mm-hmm. And they were sensitive and kind and all those kind of things, but it's just the system it is not very therapeutic.
Yeah.
And so, we decided to not do a DNC and, to wait and for her to have the baby and let it go. We had both our other kids naturally. And so that was just kind of our stance. I don't think she didn't want to handle the trauma of doing that. And so, we waited and waited and waited. And finally she went into labor. And it was just crazy because nobody had ever told, I'd worked through with clients, but I had no clue what it was going to be like myself. And so she, she started going into labor. Well, we went to the hospital just to check to make sure, because it had been a while, to make sure she wasn't septic or anything like that, because she was feeling so terrible. And we get to and I'm telling this experience because it's just terrible what people go through. Mm-hmm. You get there and you wait forever. She's like starting to bleed and starting to have the miscarriage, and they're like, go sit in the waiting room. Yep. And I'm like, what? And so, they were super nice, but eventually you go in and they just put you in a room. Mm-hmm. And I realized, I was like, why aren't we going up to the labor and delivery, And they're like, well, you can't go up there unless you're like past 18 weeks. And I'm sitting there in the waiting room like, so you mean to tell me the average person comes in here and just has their baby in the bathroom in the ER? Like a 17-week-old baby, mm-hmm. like developed like a baby, because I've had babies, and I'm sitting there thinking, I know what they look like at 18 weeks, and so it was just crazy to me that that's the case for so many women and so many families. And so we're sitting in the ER, they're having problems with their technology. And finally, I'm just like, we're leaving. Mm-hmm. Like, we're not going to sit here and do this. So we get up and leave and go home. And she labored for another, few hours and ended up having the baby at our house. And it was just such a crazy process, because like, oh my gosh, like you labor the same way, mm-hmm. With a 12-week baby that you do when we were at the hospital and we had a baby. Mm-hmm. And so then, she went to bed. I remember getting up the next morning early and cleaning everything up so she could get up and wouldn't have to see everything. And luckily I knew to do that, because I'd heard, the negative side of people not doing that, and husbands not being there, or women having to do it by themselves. And, mm-hmm. and so I had to go to this thing that I was teaching that day. So we had the baby at 4:00 in the morning, and I had to be somewhere at 6, and there was no way I could cancel it. It was just one of those things. Mm-hmm. And so I went and taught, and I just remembered being completely checked out. Yeah. I was there and teaching, but it was like completely numb. And then, the the next year we had 2 more. And it was just so rough. And every time she has a period, every time she has a thing, her breasts would get, bigger and harder. And, she'd feel like she was in labor, and that's gone on. I asked her this morning, like, you mind me talking about this? She was like, no, not at all. And, we've done therapy. We've went to, she's went to some retreats and done some 3-day intensives, and worked with medication and naturopaths and all these things to kind of get her body back. And last month was the first month she's had a period where she didn't have any symptoms of pregnancy. Yeah. She didn't have any, emotional triggers. And that was, almost 2 years ago. Wow. And it's like, that's just a devastating thing. Yeah. And, luckily we have friends that have come around and been super supportive. And so when we were talking, I say all that to say, when we were talking and emailing back and forth, you were telling me what you were doing. And then I was like, oh, y'all brought us a basket. And I was like, that was so awesome, because I think Denisa Walker had reached out to me. And so, I remember, luckily as a clinician, I had, knew what to get and had to do some of that stuff. And so, but it was really helpful. It was very gentle. It wasn't intrusive. The books that were in there were great. The things you gave were very helpful, because a lot of times I see people help other people and it's terrible. They're like, they show up when you have a loss and they give you all this stuff, but it's like over the top, unnecessary, triggering. And you guys do a very good job, without me even knowing who you were previously, of going, man, that was really great. And I remember us talking about it and being like, that was very helpful. Yeah. Like for anybody who didn't know, that would be extremely helpful. And I kept, the one thing I kept was, there was a big keychain with a bunch of stuff on it, but I took the little feet off of it. And so I put it on my keychain and have kept that. Just to remind me, like, God is good and he's sovereign. And so anyway, so I appreciate what you did for us. And if anybody's listening to this and kind of hearing our story, everybody's story is different. But if you're a husband, be there, be present. You're going to have your own grief and your own heartache with that, grieving for your wife, grieving for your kid, all your dreams and aspirations. And then the other thing is, you just always feel like they're supposed to be something. And I'll never forget, we had 2 boys, so we took pictures and had them, they were excited. And so we had to kind of walk. The youngest one didn't really get it, but the oldest one did. And so we walked them through that and talked to them about the baby. And we read several books to them about their, we still read it every once in a while. And one of our dear friends gave us, I can't remember the name of the plant. It blooms and they're blue and red, or blue and pink. They have the big bulbs on them. Anyway, I can't remember, but we thought it was a girl. And so she had brought us this plant with this letter, and you could plant it and it would bloom a certain color, and they look like balloons. And so it's kind of like celebrating when they bloom, the birth of your baby or the loss or whatever. And it ended up blooming pink. And so, we don't know if that was the case or not, but it was just very, very sweet. And that was very thoughtful. And those are the things where I'm like, that's the stuff you need to do.
Yeah, whenever I got my basket, again, my brain was just all over the place. I was in the hospital, and I didn't realize it until I got home. And I was like, oh, she left her camera equipment here. And then I start looking through it, and I didn't meet her. She's a friend of mine, but I didn't meet her for like another 6 months, I think. And I was like, who is this person? Like, she's the one who I need to look to, Yeah. But the Lord had it done that way specifically because that's what he wanted me to do. Yeah. So it's been really cool. And I know it's such a sad topic, but it's been really cool to, hey, here's this. And I'm not going to say anything, because then the Lord's able to do whatever he wants to do. And then y'all, there's this intimacy in the beginning of this love that you and your wife share, and this realness between y'all and your children. And that's for y'all during that grief. And so I just love that part of it. And
it's good.
And the cool thing is, like, I don't really get to hear a lot from these people, but like sometimes occasionally I'll get a letter here and there. But I don't hear someone like, hey, did so contact you? I'm like, no. Oh, do you want to read? I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that, because I don't know what the Lord's doing. Yeah. And so, but yeah, I think, what your wife went through was so traumatic. Did y'all ever name your child, or no? Okay.
I mean, we had a girl name, and we didn't know what it was yet. So, so we never got to use that name. That is something that has been a big loss for us, because we really wanted to use it, and we've decided at this point, unless God does something different, that we're not going to continue to try. But yeah, it's interesting, all the little nuances of loss that's in there. And
Yeah. So like if people, are wanting to know what to do, okay, so and so, had this loss, I just want to hug them and be happy again.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Like just, And so what I try to tell people is have an advocate for the family, whether it be a grandmother or a friend, and set up a meal train. But don't bring in the meal. Put it in an ice chest outside. Mow people's lawns. If they allow you to come into their home, that's a sacred space now. So do their dishes, like, sweep, take out the trash. If you're very close, do their laundry, but that's kind of
right.
And then also let people, if they want to talk about it, let them lead the conversation. Gently ask them, do you want to talk about your experience? And shut your mouth and just listen.
That's
Christians have a bad habit of saying some dumb stuff.
Yeah, we do.
And so,
well, we try to, what I always say is try not to take people's pain away.
yeah.
That our instinct is we're uncomfortable. And so we want to change that our uncomfortability, by taking their pain away. And so we say things in the moment that what I think is more traumatizing because their pain is appropriate. Right.
Yeah.
At some point down the road, if it's 10 years from now and you're still like a mess, like, yeah, there might be some things to work on. But the reality is that pain, it means something because that child, that person, that situation that you lost mattered. And so when you try to take somebody's pain away, it just doesn't help because what you're saying is that pain's inappropriate. So let's get rid of it. And so what we need to do is check in on our own hearts and our own guts and our own bodies and go, okay, why am I uncomfortable? This is not my loss. Is this speaking to some loss in myself that I need to process and deal with, that I need to give to the Lord? But yeah, tell them, like grieve, cry, be mad, do whatever you need to do. I'm here, I'm here with it. I'm not judging you.
Yeah.
I have no expectations.
Yeah. I think, and so for me, it was, I had this baby and then I wanted to talk about her. Who doesn't want to talk about their babies, right? And so when I had my baby, that's all I wanted to talk to, but nobody wanted to talk about it. And I just remember thinking, why don't people want to talk about it? This was a child and, I'm sorry you didn't get to meet her, but, and so it was just when the appropriate people who knew what to say, what color hair did she have, how did she look? What was her skin tone? Who did she look like? And so those are the things that you can ask gently. If they don't want to talk about it, that is perfectly fine. What is their name? And for a parent, using our child's name is the most beautiful thing that will come out of somebody's mouth. And so once you find out their name, use it. That's good. All the time. Make notes on your calendar. On the special holidays, anniversary, birthdays, and send them a text, send them a card, say, hey, I'm thinking about you, send them flowers. Let people know that you haven't forgotten. Become that safe space, because nobody wants to talk about your children sometimes. I had a woman deliver food, and she walked in, and it was a few weeks out, and she's like, are you pregnant again? And I was just like,
I'm going to punch you in the face.
That was my first reaction. Thank God the Lord had his hand on me because it would have gone up. But she didn't know. Yeah,
I've had clients who they're in the back sleeping and like so-and-so from church comes in, knocks on the door. Hey, where y'all at? I have your food. And, people make it all about them and they want to comfort and they want to do the right thing and they want to give. And it's like, get out, don't come in and knock on the door and want to talk and hang out.
No, nobody.
I mean, some people might want that, but
yeah,
that's not on you to make the call.
No. And so it does exactly what you said. It kind of it makes you think that you want to cancel out that whole experience.
Yeah.
And so don't avoid the subject, and if you don't know what to say, tell them, I don't know what to say.
Oh, that's super helpful.
Like I am hurting for you. I'm speechless. That says volumes.
Can you recommend any books, any ones that you give out that you love that are specifically good?
Yeah. So there's one, it's a devotional, and the author and I actually became really good friends. And her name is Kathy Wannenberg.
Okay.
And she wrote Grieving the Child I Never Knew.
Yeah, that was a good one. A little blue book.
Yeah. And she's a beautiful person. And she wrote it in a time where she was grieving herself. And so a lot of women have gone through the book, and just the Lord has ministered to them through that book. Another one that helped me is Holding On to Hope.
Okay.
That goes to the book of Job. Job is like,
it's a good one.
Oh my gosh, like your life is bad. And then you look at his, she's like, oh. And so going through that book, she has had 2 losses that just ministered to me. And I mean, those are the main 2 books. Levi Lusko has Through the Eyes of a Lion, really good book. And I also say music, play grieving music. Stephen Curtis Chapman has a CD out called Beauty for Ash. No, I forget the name of it, but it's like the whole CD is like, oh, I'm hurting, but I'm gonna worship the Lord.
Yeah,
like
is
David,
that after
right?
he lost his child?
Yeah. And so, so there's all these wonderful materials that we give out. A lot of people want like the feet print, a token. And so there's just something about having, something just to, cause you have what is called empty arm syndrome, because you want to hold on to something. So we gave out these, necklaces, and now they went out of business. So I'm trying to like make the other things. But so yes, give place to your grief. Start a journal. I had a angry journal to God, and so I would just write him angry letters, and then he would speak to
Laments.
me. Yes, I would lament, and so start a journal. Give place to your grief, and then have a friend drive you around after. Have an advocate who's going to be there and say, "Hey, let's just go for a drive."
Yeah, that's good. Any other thoughts, comments? This has been extremely helpful, and I appreciate you sharing your story and letting me share mine with you. And I hope that people that are listening, you have a story, and so if you've had loss, it's going to be different than ours, but I'm sure there's a lot of overlap. We hope that what we're talking about today has been sensitive, and but it's also made you feel validated and seen in a way that maybe nobody has done. And so if you have something, I'd challenge you to reach out to a therapist, at our practice or somewhere near you that can work with you through grief, PTSD, through trauma, through grief, because a lot of times people around us aren't equipped. And so this is part of doing the podcast, is equipping people to know what it is that people go through with these type of losses, so that you can be sensitive and go, oh yeah, I heard that. I didn't realize that happened. And I'm sure there's so much more that we could cover. But if you're out there, whether you're somebody who's lost someone or a child, or whether it's somebody somebody who has, we hope that this shines some light on a very touchy subject. I think the stats 1 in 4 women. Is that right?
1 in 4.
So it's very common. If you're in a room doing a Bible study with 15 women, most of the women in there have had a miscarriage or experienced infant loss or child loss. That's another one, like you said, even if it's early on, it's a very unique, difficult thing to deal with. I'm going to tell you my, I'll let you say if you have anything.
Well, you're going to survive it.
Yeah.
If you have had a loss, know that you will survive, that you are not alone. Reach out to us. I'm connected with a lot of other ministries like my own. And so you're not alone, and don't do this alone. Yeah. And so please reach out. And I respond to everything that people message me about. So you are not alone. That's the biggest thing.
Okay. Say your ministry one more time.
Julianna Grace Ministry.
Okay. And what's the website?
Julianna Grace Ministry. .weebly.com.
Okay.
But it's going to change pretty soon, just to Julianna Grace Ministry.
Do you have a Facebook page or Instagram or any of that
I have
stuff?
a Facebook. Just Google me.
Yeah, I'll tag it on this too. Okay, so I'll tell you, we got a few minutes left. I'll tell you my little theological idea, and you tell me if you've heard it before or if it's insane. So, and this, for you theologians out there, this might be totally horrible, but it's just what I've come up with. So, one of the things that I think was interesting for me to process when we lost our babies was thinking about, okay, so we lost this baby, let's say it's 18 weeks or 24 weeks or 30 weeks or whatever. Heaven, right? And you're like, how does this square up with eternity? Because somebody was asking me, like, even my son will ask me, like, how old are we in heaven? And so theologically, we don't really 100% know, but we know we're going to get a new body, and heaven and earth are going to be restored, and at least that's what we believe. And so I was thinking, okay, well, maybe what happens is that there's like this, average age that everybody is in heaven. Like we get these perfect bodies, older people who are decrepit and broken and hurting because they're old get brought back down to this age, right? Where there's this kind of neutral age. And maybe the beautiful thing about losing babies is that when we get to heaven, right? Because my problem with it is like, are these babies just floating around up there? Like, is there a bunch of like little, 12-week-old babies that are there? Like, how does that work? There's this, concept that people have asked me, and I've thought myself, and I thought, wouldn't it be beautiful if you have lost a baby on earth, that God's gift to you is that you get to watch that baby grow in heaven up into that perfect age. And so, for everybody who's lost a child, what if when you're there, you're fully restored, but then you get to watch your child grow and you get to parent in heaven. Yeah. So you get to watch this baby grow and become a full adult in a perfect place. Whereas if we have kids now, we're watching the pain. Like as beautiful as my kids are now, it's painful. I'm mad, I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed. They're mad, there's pain, there's suffering, there's grief, there's sickness, there's illness. And so you never get to see parenting from a kingdom perspective. And so what if the gift is that when we're in heaven, that if you've lost a baby, you get to actually do parenting from a perfect, no pain, no grief, no heartache, no sickness perspective until that age.
Yeah, that'd be beautiful, because I can't imagine doing that. To me, all that younger years is so stressful. Mm-hmm. So to do it in a perfect body and without sin, it'd be amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. I'm like, God is so good that I think he can work that out.
Oh, he's sovereign. I mean, he's like, I don't know.
Does that make sense though?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And he would do something like that, wouldn't he?
Right. Exactly. He would.
I wouldn't put it past him.
I know. Yeah. It's good. So anyway, sweet. That just has given me hope. And, again, I don't know if that's bad theology. You can get into it. But the reality is that I think God it's going to make sense when it makes sense. Yeah. And we're going to have eternity together worshiping him with no more suffering, no more pain. And all the babies that we've lost, all the babies that are aborted, all the babies that have died are going to be involved in that restoration and that reconciliation somehow. And so that's the way that I see it, is that no matter what, if you're a parent and you've birthed a child or you've lost a child or you've miscarried a child or you've had an abortion, that will be, God can restore that.
Yeah, and he will restore.
Yes.
I mean, if you put your faith in Jesus Christ, period, it's your faith that saves you, and you will be restored.
That's right.
And so, yes, even women who have had abortions, my heart goes out to them, mm-hmm. because it's such a terrible, hard decision. But you too will be saved. Absolutely. And forgiven. And ta-da, your baby's there looking at you, mm-hmm. And so, yes, I love that. Okay.
We're going to end with that. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Lisa, so much for coming in. This has been really good for me. I'm glad I got through it without completely breaking down and booing. So we love your ministry. Thank you for what you're doing. It's so unique and so needed. And it's so subtle. And so I appreciate that about you and your heart. And let's work. We'll get together on that, getting some stuff on the website and coming up with something. Brandy Walker, one of our therapists, she works on grief, and we're working on some stuff to give people kind of end of life ideas, kind of in the same way of like, you have a suicide or you have a death or you have a chronic illness, giving people kind of a checklist and a support of what they can do. Because a lot of times people die and we don't know what to do. We got to come up with funeral arrangements and all these things. So anyway, I would love to incorporate you in that and figure out how to have that as a resource for people, so that when they lose a baby, that they're like, there's a way for them to know what are the options and why those options are good and bad, so they can weigh them and then make choices based on their unique circumstance. All right. Y'all like and subscribe to the podcast. Thank you so much. We know this was heavy. If you're grieving right now, just listen to this. Know that the Lord is with you and beside you, and he is the comforter. And so God bless you guys and have a good day.